and thank you very much, Liesl, for your time this afternoon. So perhaps let's start with a quick mandate of the African Union chairperson and just how much power they possess.
Yes, good afternoon. It is very important. The African Union chairship is rotating through regions. So South Africa will only get a chance again in about 15 years. That was the last was in 2002, former President Thabo Mbeki. So the AU chairperson for 1 year does have a mandate to look at issues like peace and security, and President Cyril Ramaphosa has now just sent 3 special envoys, for example, to Ethiopia that he appointed to look at the serious conflict there. So those are some of the things that the AU chairperson is called upon to do, and then to implement the theme of the year, which this year is silencing the guns. So, that was actually some of the things that he was called upon to do. President Ramaphosa actually stepped up to the plate when it came to the COVID-19 crisis, which is something no African head of state had ever had to deal with of the African Union. And actually, the move to digital also made it easier in a way to convene meetings in a very inclusive way, I would say, and to launch a number of initiatives on digital, on platforms. But at the same time, it makes diplomacy and talks between heads of state slightly more difficult because in the past, you would convene meetings in Addis Ababa, or let's say it would have been in Pretoria, but now with online, there are advantages but disadvantages as well.
COVID-19 leadership check. Let's take a look at the theme of silencing the guns. We have a situation still in the Sahel region, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, for instance. Just how much headway have we made in terms of that and silencing the guns?
Yes, sorry, I can't hear you very well, but I hear you mentioning the Democratic Republic of Congo and Cabo Delgado in northern Mozambique, of course. I mean, these are important issues, and South Africa has been treating these issues, and including Zimbabwe as well, on a sort of a bilateral manner when it comes to the DRC, but also within forums like SADC. Now, our sense was in the beginning of the year that this chairship of South Africa could be an opportunity to sort of launch initiatives that, I don't want to say that circumvent SADC, but in many times, very often the African Union uses the issue of subsidiarity to regions almost as a way of not addressing certain issues. So, for example, they would say, no, but Cabo Delgado is an issue for SADC, and then if there's no action on SADC, then almost nothing moves. And there is still 2 months left of South Africa's chairship. So the idea was to say, is it not possible to convene, for example, some kind of AU SADC joint summit, which we've seen in other parts of the continent. For example, the AU works with ECOWAS in West Africa on issues like Mali and the crisis in Cote d'Ivoire and so on. So the chairship, as I said, it's not over completely yet. Could have been and could be an opportunity actually to address issues that affect South Africans directly. Ethiopia is important, of course, for the continent and so on, but there are many other issues that affect us here in Southern Africa, and the chairship could be or could have been an opportunity. It is very tricky, as I said, convening meetings online and so on, but we have seen this year, 2020, that the AU have managed to deal with other issues, not as the chair directly, but the AU Commission with other actors and special envoys and so on.
Liesl, are you able to hear me clearly now?
it's really, I can't hear much, but please go ahead. I'll try and hear you.
In terms of influencing positive governance issues, how did we fare? We've seen a brotherhood throughout, any AU chairpersonship where elections are declared successful, and that has been the case in the case of President Cyril Ramaphosa also endorsing the Tanzanian elections in Cote d'Ivoire as well, for example.
Yes, I think people are disappointed at the reaction to these elections. Of course, it is very difficult, and I mean, these are the heads of state, incumbents in most cases in Tanzania, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Guinea, for example, we had the same thing. But there were huge flaws, the closing of the political space, a lack of freedom of speech. And then if the AU chairperson congratulates these leaders, call these elections successful, a deepening of democracy even, people in those countries have expected more from one of the major democracies on the continent that has in the past led when it came to setting norms and I believe are trying to, in many cases, even behind the scenes, make peace in some countries and try and promote democratic values. So I think South Africa fell short as AU chairperson when it came to those elections. I'm not saying, and it is very difficult to do within all the constraints of the African Union, that there would be statements condemning the electoral flaws, but then to see the chairperson, as I say, congratulating those incumbents when even they themselves, I think in the case of Cote d'Ivoire, for example, the president a couple of months ago even said he would not run for a third term. He's already served 10 years, Alassane Ouattara. Then the former prime minister passed away and so on. So there were certain circumstances, but then he stood for a third term. And I think people in the country, people internationally wouldn't have described that as really a deepening of democracy. It's rather a crisis that now has to be dealt with.
Liesl, very quickly for us, just how much of an impact can one person make in just a year, after all?
It is true, but I think President Ramaphosa has actually made an impact through the way the COVID-19 crisis was handled, being more inclusive than his predecessors. So the two previous chairs were Rwanda and Egypt. More inclusive, for example, also drawing in the players from the private sector that we hardly ever see at the African Union. So harnessing more than just governments on the continent. South Africa is also now fielding candidates for the AU Commission elections, which is something we've raised in the past. So South Africa, so some of these things that were, I would say, launched this year could have a lasting impact on the African Union as an institution and the way it functions and making it more effective. But I do think when it comes to silencing the guns and issues of governance, the impact was not as was expected. But South Africa will no longer be chair next year, but will play an important role as one of the big funders of the African Union and can still promote those values of democracy and free elections, etc.
Thank you very much. Senior researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, Liesl Louw-Vaudran.